Hello everyone, it's Rafael Gutierrez. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about Sanshin and Naihanchi, pretty much because what I want to talk about is hip rotation. Hip rotation. And these are actually two katas which are known for that. I'm moving this a little, seeing if I can, sometimes it seems my sound's a little off and sometimes it has to do with where it comes in. So we're going to deal with the rotation of the hips, and it actually is an interesting concept that I was actually getting at, and it's one thing that kept me getting a lot of false starts when I did wanted to do this video, and that's because hips has a different meaning depending on who you ask. I remember when I was in anatomy, there was a article I read where it talked about how if you ask men where their hips are, they'll go to their ilium, the hip bone area. If you ask women where their hips bone was, they would go to the hip bone where the femur is, the greater trochanter. And so there was a slight variation within men and women. Now that's why in anatomy and science, we tend to use Latin to determine what's going on. So we do not get stuck with terms that aren't necessarily correct. Now, what I'm going to try to use is I'm going to try to stick to the os coxae, which is the bones of the pelvis, pretty much, and the femur. And that way you'll avoid some confusion, seeing how there's going to be a lot because of other things. Now, as always, I did my pictures earlier. And here they are. Now, what I wanted to show is this would be, and I know it's not perfect, but this would be the lateral, pretty much the anterior view of the pubic bone, the pelvic bone here. And you can see the femurs here. So what I was telling you earlier is if you ask most men where their hips are, they'll actually point to these two bones here. If you ask women, they usually end up pointing to these here. And it's just a variation on actually how, if you actually look at how the body actually moves. Not moves, but is in men and women. Slight variations cause slight differences. So I'm going to try to use the os coxae for this entire area and the femurs for these. Now, I also drew this here, which I was trying to find a way to draw a superior view. So if you actually take this, rotate it, so you can see where the vertebrae would be and the os coxae here, you can see it's kind of like a steering wheel. And usually in kinesiology, they use this because when we're talking about rotating the hips, we're not talking about something that is loose and can move around. We're talking about this big wheel here. And so it's going to rotate either this way. You also have the pelvic tilts and everything, which I won't deal with. So you think of it as a steering wheel. So you can either rotate it coming from here to here and here to here, or you can go the other way from here to here, which would take this to the back. So those are the rotations we're dealing with. And so to get those rotations, we have to pull and push. Actually, we have to pull from different areas. And what we need is we need the muscles from the femur, which are usually used to rotate the femur, to rotate the hip. Interesting thing with anatomy is a lot of times people tell you what something does, and oh, it does. They might say lateral rotators of the femur, and there'll be muscles here which cause the femur to go from, well, pretty much the knee going forward to the knee going laterally or to the outside of the body. And so those would be your lateral rotators. That's actually a name of a muscle group. It does, by the way, there is a muscle in the gluteal area, the gluteus maximus, which is also used in that lateral rotation. The ones that actually move the knee from outside to inside would be medial rotators, which would be most of your gluteal muscles, except for the gluteus maximus. The gluteus maximus is actually used for lateral rotation. And so that's one of the slight variations on this. So when we're talking about lateral rotators, though, we actually are talking about rotating the femur. And so that's actually one of the hard things. So we're going to have muscles from the femur, and they're going to act by pulling on the os coxae. So the lateral rotators will actually move if you lock it in place, it will actually, instead of pulling the leg to rotate outwardly, you will pull the hip, the os coxae, the bone here, inward. Now, if you think about it, if I'm rotating that muscle, that bone inward, I'm getting this rotation here. And this is where Naihanchi and Sanchin come in. If you actually do Naihanchi and Sanchin, and I will apologize one thing with Sanchin, I don't do it in my style. I have talked to people who do Goju-ryu and Wichi-ryu, and they seem to use it this way as well. I know not everyone uses the same way, but what you are actually doing is you're using the gluteal butt muscles and the hip the lateral rotator of the hip to rotate this, the os coxae. Now, if you think of the legs and how much power you can actually develop by rotating like that, it's a lot more than if you're just punching using your arms. You can see this in a lot of sports. If you actually watch baseball, they tend to use that when they try to swing a baseball bat or actually throw a ball. If you watch actually boxing, you'll notice that they tend to use that rotation of the hip to actually drive in power. So these rotators, which are actually inside here and out here, are what are going to drive your legs to push your hip in certain ways. It's actually the reason why when you're doing Naihanchi, you are in an unusual stance. That will actually make it so the only way you can get power from twisting is either from using your hips, which will actually develop that hard power, or from rotating your back here, not using your hips, just your back, which will not develop the same amount of power as if you're using the lateral rotators and the gluteal muscles. Think about it. Think about how big the gluteal muscles are. Lateral rotators are going to be some of the ones that are going to be used to get that type of power as well. And so that's actually one of the big things that happens with with using the hip. Now, as I have finished from the tip of the toes all the way to the hips, it's actually kind of interesting to see how you would use this totally in its entirety. So I want you to think of this. I'm going to start by talking about not pulling back, but just from a natural position and going either with a block and punch together, or a block and then punch, or just a straight in, going in for a punch. So as a punch begins, you actually start with your legs. Your feet are going to actually hold the balance, and they're going to let you, what you're going to want to do is shift a little forward. As you shift a little forward, you actually start getting momentum from your, pretty much shifting your center of gravity forward. All the muscles of the foot that help maintain your balance are going to be used. Then you're going to rotate your knee inwardly. Actually, you're going to rotate your tibia medially to actually start developing the power. As you then end up using your gluteal muscles to actually rotate a little more, and you're also going to use your back leg to drive the power forward as well. And so what ends up happening is you're going to have the rotational force going from the floor to your leg, to your lower leg, to your leg, to your pretty much your os coxae and femurs, and then that's actually what's going to come through your arm. That's actually how you're going to develop the largest amount of power. If you think of your legs, and how much power you can develop from them. If you think about it, if you weigh 200 pounds, that'd be me, I can actually lift myself with one leg. So it means that I actually can develop enough power to lift 200 pounds straight up from the ground with one leg. If you use both of them, you can actually do the 200 pounds. And so that's actually one of the neat things with this, is as you actually develop more and more power, as you develop more and more technique, you can actually see how different things would work. If you do Naihanchi or Sanchin for power, start thinking about the muscles that are inside your legs or in your glutes, and see how you're using those to develop power. You're actually using that movement, while it's small, just to get that little bit of power. You're not going to be moving your knees much, but you are going to be able to get that little twist, which is going to be slightly hidden. So pretty much you're going to be using these two bones here, one on one side and one on the other, to rotate in and out. So you're going to have to rotate one here, and so you're going to be doing something like this. And as you do that, your hips would actually be doing this. Now, if you can do that without moving your knees, you're now getting really small movements, but with a lot of large amount of muscles. I hope you enjoy this and have a nice day. Please keep safe. Wear a mask when you're out in public. It doesn't matter how much protection it gives you. A little bit is better than nothing, right? Hope you have a nice day, and please subscribe if you enjoy this. Have a nice day.